You are listening to the Wealth Formula Podcast with Buck Joffrey. Get ready to change your life.
Welcome, everybody. This is Buck Joffrey with the Wealth Formula Podcast coming to you from Montecito, California. Before we begin today, I do want to remind you that there is a website associated with this podcast that airs. Obviously, this podcast is both video and audio. I bet some of you didn't even know that. I bet you some of you have been listening on audio thinking that there's no video, but there is video too. It's on YouTube and that kind of thing. Not that it makes a difference. I mean, you just stare at me kind of talking to people and that kind of thing. But there's also a website, and that website is wealthformula.com. Wealthformula.com is where you go if you want to get all the associated resources, sign up for some of the lists and goodies that we have associated with the Wealth Formula brand, including an opportunity to sign up for our accredited investor club if you are an accredited investor, and other various webinars and things like that you can download there as well. Today, I want to talk to you about changing your thinking a little bit, right? Let me just pretend for a moment, or let's pretend for a moment that you are an alien from another planet visiting Earth. You got stuck here and had to figure out how to get by. And, you would quickly realize, first and foremost, that you'd need some money. And that would probably, in the quickest possible way to make that money, would be to get a job. But now the good news is you're extraordinarily intelligent. You're not an earthling. You have above average IQ. And in fact, that IQ may land you a high-paying technical gig with like a, Google or Facebook or something like that. And then you might actually really enjoy that job at first because, you're manipulating data and, stealing data from people, and that's kind of cool. But then after a while, the long hours and, stale routine might start getting on your nerves a little bit. You might start realizing that the only eventual way out of the rat race would be to figure out how to put all that extra money from your paycheck, from your high-paying tech job into something that's going to help it grow, i.e. investing it, right? Now, here's a question. If you were an alien from outer space, would your immediate thought at that point about how am I going to grow this money, how am I going to invest it, would it immediately be, well, I think I ought to hire an investment advisor or somebody, who's an RIA or something like that. And so that investment advisor could then invest that money into a balanced portfolio of stocks, bonds, and mutual funds for a low fee, of course. Probably not. It sounds so complicated, right? It's so complicated. Why would that even cross your mind? As a highly intelligent life form, you would probably realize that, even when you realize what all these things were, hey, that may not be the most efficient way to get me retired and, just so I could be a retired alien. And so you would be unadulterated by conventional wisdom because you're an alien, and your attention would then probably go to things that made a lot more sense for you. Like, hey, maybe I should look at some tax advantage real estate. I mean, after all, I am a legal alien, and I am paying taxes, so I need to mitigate that. You might also look for other sources of, income, buying income sources and all that kind of stuff. Well, okay, so the point I'm trying to make here, and I'm sure you enjoyed my moment of science fiction, is that, it's not a bad idea once in a while to question conventional wisdom. And if you've taken my course, Roadmap to Real Wealth, that's at wealthformularoadmap.com, by the way, I have a section on this. The idea about conventional wisdom, not always being the path to take. And why? Because unfortunately, conventional wisdom is often tainted by special interests. There's an example of the sugar industry hiding the fact, I think it was in the 40s or 50s, that sugar was in fact a major player in cardiac disease, which we know now, but we didn't for so long. I mean, shoot, remember that food pyramid? Pizza was like the healthiest food you could possibly eat according to the food pyramid. And then conventional wisdom at other times can just be completely wrong. The world, in fact, is not flat, right? Anyway, approaching personal finance, entrepreneurship, even the way that you live your life on a daily basis can really be enhanced with a fresh perspective, without the fear of violating societal norms and conventional wisdom. In fact, it can be very healthy, and it can be potentially even a lucrative thing. Look at me. Conventional wisdom. I'm a guy used to be a surgeon, right? Spent like all these years training and was making mid six figures. And then I just went my own way, became an entrepreneur, and hey, it worked out for me. But that definitely was not conventional wisdom, right? That was a very risky play. But anyway, listen, in my guest on Wealth Formula podcast this week, he reminds us of this entire concept. And he even suggests that it may, if you do this successfully, may turn you on to your inner entrepreneur, which I didn't really think that everybody had, but he does. And so I want you to hear his point, and hopefully for those of you who want it to happen, it'll turn on your inner entrepreneur and take you to the next level. So when we come back, the author of Alien Thinking, The Unconventional Path to Breakthrough Ideas, Michael Wade. Welcome back to the show, everyone. Today, my guest on Wealth Formula Podcast is Michael Wade, who is a professor of innovation and strategy at IMD and directs IMD's Global Center for Digital Business Transformation. He also helps individuals and organizations respond to the opportunities and threats of digital disruption. In addition, he is the author of Alien Thinking, The Unconventional Path to Breakthrough Ideas. Michael, welcome to Wealth Formula Podcast.
Thank you, Buck. It's a great pleasure to be here.
Thank you. It's funny because, this book, The Unconventional Path to Breakthrough Ideas, I think the thesis to even start before you begin with the content of the book is an interesting one. And I wonder if you'd comment on that. I'm an entrepreneur. I think that, I happened to go to medical school and I happened to do all these things, and I discovered late in life, you know what? I really like solving problems, and I'm really good at finding opportunities and all these things. And when people ask me about entrepreneurship, I say to them, I was born this way. It's not a choice. And your book seems to suggest there might be some choice and development in this.
Yeah, I would have to disagree with what you just said.
Okay.
Based on the evidence, entrepreneurship is a learned behavior that anybody, any of your listeners, if they want to be entrepreneurs, they can become entrepreneurs, right? Mm-hmm. The barrier is, the right attitude, the right training, the right help when you need it, skills and behaviors you pick up along the way. But, the science suggests this is not something you're just born with or you're not, mm-hmm. right? That it's a learned behavior, and the great entrepreneurs are no different than the rest of us in many ways.
I'm curious about the science you just mentioned. And again, I'm glad to hear this, and I am not pushing back at all. It's my, I've always, with my own thinking patterns, pretty much just understood that this was something that, my dad has the same, my dad is an entrepreneur, and I didn't start out an entrepreneur. I started down this pathway and I ended up veering in that direction. What is that science that you're talking about? Tell me about the science.
Well, there's plenty of sciences that, studies that have looked at entrepreneurs and tried to divine some kind of common themes, right? Are they taller than the average person, or are they, one of the most common factors to look for in entrepreneurs is are entrepreneurs more risk-taking than normal people? Do they take more risks mm-hmm. than regular people, right? You hear these stories about mortgaging the houses and all this, and there's no data to suggest that's the case. In fact, most successful entrepreneurs are not particularly big risk takers. They bound their risk like a professional gambler.
Yes.
They'll set up an amount that they're prepared to lose, and they won't go on after that. So there's all kinds of interesting insights that you get when you look at entrepreneurs. They're very good connectors typically. They're very good at making connections and not falling in love with their ideas too early or too strongly. That's another common mistake, right? Entrepreneurs stick too long with their ideas, even when they're getting feedback to suggest they're not very good. So they're kind of, they're flexible. They're people in that they're not sitting in a basement somewhere just coming up with something. They're testing, and they're not particularly big risk takers.
How can you, again, understanding that when I think about, the business ideas that I've had and the businesses I've started over the past decade, a lot of it comes down to, having exposure to a lot of different things, a lot of different paradigms, things that are completely unrelated, drawing parallels and seeing inefficiencies. How can somebody who doesn't do that necessarily naturally, how does an investor, say, or an entrepreneur who's looking for an opportunity best position themselves to recognize those new opportunities?
For a lot of people, that's just a muscle that they don't exercise very much, right? And one of the things we talk about in the book is, training yourself in a way to pay attention to the world around you. And after a while, we just don't do that very well. We sort of look and we see the same things, and after a while, we don't see them anymore. So the opportunities that you're talking about are maybe right in front of us, but we don't see them because we're no longer paying attention to them. So and really strong entrepreneurs are good at this. They question things. And I imagine, Buck, that you do this too, right? You question things like, we just assume this is the way it is, but really does it have to be that way? Right? We talk about in the book of what's the opposite of deja vu, right? This idea of deja vu where you see something, you think, I've seen that before, right? I've seen that before. The opposite of that is looking at something that you see every day, but seeing it as if you're seeing it for the first time. And this is kind of a skill that can be fine-tuned. And that's when you see those kind of hidden opportunities.
When I think about, and I talk about this a fair amount. I've talked about this a fair amount on the show, but I think that a lot of my colleagues who are highly successful professionals, I feel like one of the biggest limiting factors in their own ability to develop that muscle, as you say, is actually previous success. And, an abundant amount of success in the academic system that constantly perpetuates this cycle of, okay, there's what we want you to learn. You learn it, you perform without going out of bounds. And when I think about that, for business or, with investing, for example, which, I've been lucky to have a fair amount of success with, there's a significant danger with that notion of sticking with what is conventional wisdom or what works. Is that fair?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. We're prisoners of our assumptions, even if we don't know what they are, right? And that's the worst case. We don't realize the assumptions that we have and that we follow. And yeah, absolutely. Breaking out of that prison is a very, very strong step towards innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurship. There's no question about that.
How do you do that? How do you do that? If you're making, a comfortable living but you feel like you need, you want something, you just know that there's something else. How do you train yourself to think differently? And maybe that's what alien thinking is all about. Maybe that would be a good time to break that up.
That's it. That is what alien thinking is all about. And there's a couple of reasons we chose that. Kind of a strange title, right, for a book. But there's a couple of reasons we chose that title. And one of them is the metaphor itself of an alien, right? Because the thing about an alien is, they're coming down to Earth and they're seeing everything with fresh eyes. And this is just what we're talked about, right? So how do you see the world with fresh eyes? Well, you imagine what it's like to be an alien. And that's what it's like. You're suddenly seeing everything afresh. It's like when you go on holidays, in a new place, the smells are a little bit stronger. Your hearing is a little bit better. You're seeing things a little clearly. It's all new. Your senses are heightened. And this is kind of the idea of how do we become like an alien? Now, you look at movies and it usually doesn't end well for aliens. It's not easy to be an alien, right? They often get shot down.
Yeah.
And that's true also of entrepreneurs and innovators. They often get shot down too. So the book is around, not only about how you come up with that great idea, but also how you take that idea and you drive it through into some kind of breakthrough solution. So the other reason we chose alien, because actually it's an acronym, and the first letter of each letter in alien, or all the letters in alien, stand for kind of a step that you can follow in order to come up with these great ideas and transform them into breakthrough solutions.
Well, don't keep us in suspense. What are those?
Okay.
What are those words? Sure, just so we have a general outline.
I can walk through that, and so we've already kind of talked about this already, Buck, is attention, right? Is paying attention to the world around you.
Yeah.
And you asked how to do that. So there's different tips and tricks that you can use, right? To do that. Like you can zoom in, right, on something. So you're looking at something a lot more closely than you typically do, right? And so you're seeing it in a different light. You can zoom out so you can kind of see the big picture a little more. You can switch focus. And this is kind of a trick you can use, right? You can think, what would the world be like if you were blind or deaf or a child or a foreigner coming in, and so you try and force yourself into these different perspectives and try and gain that kind of new insight. So attention is all about getting these new insights and finding these patterns that didn't exist before. And today, with the digital tools and technologies available to us, this is easier than ever, right? Before, if you wanted to study a tribe, you'd have to go and, live 5 years in Papua New Guinea or whatever, like Margaret Mead did. But now you just go to subreddits, you go to track some Reddit communities or WhatsApp or LinkedIn, and you can find out a lot of insights from a lot of different places. Sensors, IoT, there's all kinds of ways that we can pay attention to the world around us now, which is much more than we could in the past.
What's L?
L is you're gonna like L. L is levitation,
nice.
Right? So levitation. And levitation is counterintuitive in a way because it's stepping back, right? And what we find, and the science supports this pretty strongly, is that a brain at rest. So, when we say at rest, what I mean is not involved in a heavy cognitive activity. It's actually working as hard as a brain which is busy doing something. The problem is today, we just don't give our brains enough time to disengage, to levitate, to take time out. Professional athletes, they take time outs, right? Amateurs don't. So it's forcing ourselves to reflect, to step back, to think and reflect. And when we do that, we give ourselves the gift of time to do that. We often come up with really, really interesting ideas. And there's no, it shouldn't be surprising that some of our best ideas we come up with in the shower.
Oh, I was just about to say that. I was just
exactly right. You're busy, but your brain isn't. So your brain can kind of work away on all those ideas that you were talking about earlier, or in the car, or exercising. We just don't, especially in a digital world, and COVID's made this worse, right?
Yeah.
We don't block enough time in our agenda just to think and reflect.
Okay, I'm going to keep going. I.
So, okay. A, you're paying attention to the world. I, you're giving yourself time to reflect, right? Einstein said that creativity is the residue of time wasted, right?
Uh-huh.
I is imagination, right? Is trying to come up with new ideas, new thoughts, putting strange things together and seeing what comes out of it. And for many of us, we've lost the ability to be imaginative. Our imagination is kind of, real life has beat it out of us.
Yeah.
You were talking earlier about people in these jobs and, they're just 9 to 5 or whatever. And you don't really have time and space anymore to be imaginative. And when I said it's been beaten out of us, it means it was in us. right? And we know that because all kids are imaginative, right? I mean, you're a kid, you have a very active imagination, you're playful, right? And we don't play enough anymore. We're just so serious. Our lives are so serious.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult to be imaginative if you're being serious. So it's, we suggest, do something goofy, right? Play. Don't feel like you shouldn't be doing that just because you're 40 or 50 or whatever. You can still be goofy. Yeah. And when you're like that, often you come up with really, really creative things. Experimentation. Right? Got to test. Right? Your first idea is not going to be your best idea, no question. Right? I'm sure you found that in your career too, right? You have a great idea, you think, I got to change the world with this. And then you realize, actually, but there's a seed of something in there. So you test and you flex and whatnot. And the way experimentation is done by many people and many organizations is not very effective, to be honest. It's either like the scientific method, which is, very much you try to prove or disprove something, right? You're rejecting the null hypothesis. It's very much extreme. Whereas if you really want to be creative and innovative, experimentation the goal is to improve, not to prove something, right? So it's a constant series of tests and retests, learning as you go along to try and take that idea and make it something a lot better than it was at the start.
Yeah, and I guess that's also part of the whole issue of not necessarily being worried that there's a failure or that it's not the right idea, right? That's one of the things I feel like keeps people from even starting is the fear that, what's the point? It's probably not going to work anyway. And then what's the last N?
So I agree with you, right? The fear of failure is a big blocker for people that don't want to start. Or like you said, they have the good job and, they're just paying off their mortgage and they don't want to get a lot of risk. So fear of failure, risk aversion is a big issue. But also the opposite is not good either.
Right.
Right? If you have no fear of failure, you jump into it without really a lot of reflection or a lot of humility or a lot of doubt. Doubt is not a bad thing. Right? It's your mind telling you, maybe I should think this through, right? So there's kind of a sweet spot in the middle. You don't want to be overconfident either. So it's a danger having too little or too much of any of that. Now the N is an important one, and the N is navigation. This is where you have a great idea, you've played with it, you've tinkered with it, you think it's ready, and then you go out there and share it, but you don't do it in a very clever way. Right. So it's stakeholder management. It's understanding people's realities, people's motivations. It's politics. We talk in the book about, this great story of the guy who invented the digital camera. It's a well-known story, right? And he worked for Kodak. We know that, right? A guy named Steve Sasson. And the blame is often put on Kodak, right? I mean, they were stupid not to listen to this guy. But it also comes out when you actually talk to the guy that he made mistakes too. Right, in how he was navigating this idea within the company. For example, he sold it internally as filmless photography. Those are the words he used, filmless photography.
Yeah.
Those are not great words to use when you're trying to, when you're pitching the idea to a company that sells film. Right?
Yeah.
That's how they make their money. So a little bit of understanding of the environment to navigate and when the right time to kind of come up to avoid getting shot down is really, really important. So there's all kinds of ways that you can increase the odds of people buying into your idea. That's navigation.
Do you actually do any kind of events for people on this type of thing? Because it just seems like it's a really something you really have to drill down on. Or is this, right now, do you feel like the book is adequate for people to change their mindset?
We put everything we think you need in the book to get started. Now, the book is coming. There's 3 of us who wrote this book. We're all professors. We've all been teaching innovation for years and years and years. We've all been disappointed with a lot of the existing methodologies. We don't see the real outcome that we hope from design thinking and lean startup.
Yeah.
I mean, these are all good, but somehow, we'd expect with all these methodologies out there, there'd be a lot more innovation, and there just isn't.
Yeah.
So we wanted to create something that was just really simple and intuitive. You don't need Post-it notes. You don't need whiteboards. You don't need a strong, well-defined methodology. It's just there. You just got to understand how to use it. So yeah, I mean, we run all kinds of workshops and things around it, but everything you need is in the book.
Yeah, it's really about a change in perspective, which I think is sometimes really what people need to have, right? And again, you're emphasizing with the word alien there, which I think is a good one, because even in the investing world, I've actually used the metaphor before that obviously not obvious to you, but for my audience, my focus is in real assets, real estate, things like that, tangible assets. And I always say to people, even, open your eyes and think, if you're, I've used this analogy, if you're an alien, you came down and you're trying to figure out, okay, you earn your money by doing something and then you're trying to invest it, what would you do? And, your natural inclination wouldn't go directly to stocks, bonds, and mutual funds, right? It might be something different. So it's really a matter of perspective, and also just changing your perspective on, really what you do every day as well, not just your investing per se.
Right. And I think that what we talk about in the book is for anyone. We're business school professors, but the alien thinking approach is not just for business people either. I mean, it's for people in any walk of life that want to be more innovative and want to be more creative and want to squeeze more out of the ideas, have more ideas, and then get more value out of those ideas.
Well, this is great stuff here. I appreciate it, Michael. And the book, again, is called Alien Thinking, The Unconventional Path to Breakthrough Ideas. And you've now convinced me that it's not, entrepreneurship is not a hereditary thing. It might be a curse for some of us who are more tend towards that direction, but it's probably not just genetic. Thank you very much for being on the show. And by the way, the book you can get anywhere, Amazon, or is it specific places?
Anywhere you buy your books, you can find it there.
Okay, fantastic. Is it on Audible?
It is. Yeah, we have an audiobook version for sure.
Very good, because that's we got a lot of busy people driving around all the time. So, Michael, thank you so much for being on the show again, and hope to have you back sometime again in the near future.
My pleasure, Buck, and best of luck with the podcast.
We'll be right back. Welcome back to the show, everyone. Hope you enjoyed it. I certainly did. That was a fun conversation for me. And, maybe I could be convinced that entrepreneurship might not be completely a genetic thing, although I still think it has a strong prevalence towards at least being open to it. I think there's a strong element of that. But hopefully, in reading Michael's book, you get an opportunity to test my theory. And if you've always wanted to be an entrepreneur, maybe it gives you a little extra kick in the right direction. Come to think of it, the book that did it for me was Robert Kiyosaki's Cash Flow Quadrant. So, I wasn't looking for opportunities. I wasn't thinking of myself as an entrepreneur during that period. So it's quite possible that there is some sort of trigger, and maybe Michael's figured it out. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the show. That's it for me this week on Wealth Formula Podcast. This is Buck Joffrey signing off.
Thank you for listening to the Wealth Formula Podcast. Visit us on the web at wealthformula.com. The information contained in this podcast are opinions, not fact. As always, consult your own financial team before making any investment. See you next time.